in the meantime. Jonathan is the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Jonathan, we appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We first want to start off by talking about Bibi Netanyahu. He published a letter in the Wall Street Journal this week offering 3 stipulations to accepting a peace deal. He says those 3 things are that 1, Hamas must be destroyed, 2, Gaza must be demilitarized, and 3, Palestinian society must be de-radicalized. Now, I don't think any of those are groundbreaking announcements for the prime minister to make. Did you hear anything surprising in that op-ed?
And I might add not just Netanyahu's position, but the position of most Israelis. They're disunited about whether he should stay in power. He's a controversial politician. He's been in power forever. But I think Israeli society is united behind the war in a way that even surprises me just how strong it is. Even the New York Times is ready to acknowledge that the Israeli people are behind the war. But I think the point here is that he is laying out 3 very practical, this is not pie in the sky objectives. These are very practical if you actually want peace. Obviously, if there's going to be peace between Gaza and Israel, Hamas has to be completely defeated. Israel is not going to tolerate any longer the existence of a terrorist state on its border so that it can continue to perpetrate more October 7th slaughters. It's just not going to happen. They are going to continue. And a lot of the coverage and some of the commentary about the war seems to act as if the Israelis were kidding when they said, no, we can't tolerate this. Why are they continuing to attack? And it's sort of like, no, they're not kidding. They really mean this. They mean it because their security is at stake. The morale of their troops, I can tell you from everybody I speak to who is serving or has come out of there or families, the morale of the Israeli troops is very high because they're defending their homes and their families. The Israeli people are behind them because that's what they're doing. So Hamas has to be completely defeated. They will not accept anything else. Now, as far as after the war is over, we're a long way from there. Yes, Israel is going to insist that Gaza be demilitarized as far as the Palestinians are concerned. They will not allow another October 7th. They know that if they let it just go back to the way it was on October 6th, they're just asking for another war. So no, it has to completely change. Now, the de-radicalizations, or even as many, including Netanyahu, say the denazification of Gaza and Palestinian society, that's a very long range, and it's an aspiration. Because Palestinian society is completely radicalized. Its education system, its media, the entire, the political culture of the Palestinians is inextricably linked with their war on Israel's existence. That's why they've never been able to allow themselves to accept a peace plan, which would give them an independent state next to Israel, which they've been offered many times. That's often left out of the commentary and the coverage. That has to change. Now, how can that happen? Well, you can point to precedents like what happened in Nazi Germany after the defeat of the Nazis. The problem is much of the world doesn't want that to happen. Much of the world is happy to let the Palestinians continue on with their delusions about someday destroying Israel. That's why they keep pushing for ceasefires to allow Hamas to survive and stay in place. That's why they say, there must be immediately an independent Palestinian state in Gaza after the shooting stops, as if there wasn't an independent state there before the shooting started. So that's, it's aspirational, but that is the only way there will be long-term peace, despite all the talk of the need for peace. Only when the Palestinians give up their fantasies of destroying Israel, slaughtering its people, will there be peace.
So, Jonathan, we also want to look at Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi militia claiming responsibility for a missile attack yesterday on a container ship in the Red Sea. It was for an attempt to attack Israel with drones, they say. Reuters says that the Houthis have been attacking ships that they say have links to Israel in the entrance to the Red Sea. What do you and perhaps your JNS reporters know about what kind of links they're talking about there? What links do these ships have to Israel?
Well, it's not clear that all of these ships have a link to Israel. Obviously, Israel does have a have a port in Eilat, which leads into the Red Sea. I think the Houthis are not so much interested in interdicting Israeli naval shipping to Eilat. They're interested in interdicting Western shipping in a very strategic area of the world. And this is a problem that the United States brought on itself. When President Biden came to office, among his priorities was ending the war between the Saudis and the Iranian-backed Houthis. The Houthis are like Hezbollah in Lebanon. They take their orders from the Iranians. And it was very important for the Biden administration to, scold the Saudis, end the Saudi war against the Houthis. That was considered a great priority, and they pretty much did that. And the result is, as you might expect, the Houthis, rearmed and are now in a position to cause real trouble, not just for Israel. Israel's security, is not really greatly threatened by the Houthis. The Houthis threaten Saudi Arabia. They threaten the flow of oil in the Persian Gulf and in shipping through, as I say, a very strategic area of the globe, the Red Sea leading to the Suez Canal. The United States needs to do something about this. It needs to send a message to Iran and the Houthis that we won't tolerate this. But in fact, the United States has shown that it will tolerate it. So of course the Houthis are getting more aggressive, acting on Iranian orders to push this as far as they can. I don't think they really think that they can save Hezbollah, save Hamas in Gaza. That's a lost cause. They know Hamas is doomed. But they do hope to cause more trouble for the United States and cause more trouble for Biden. And he seems determined. The State Department and the Biden foreign policy team seem determined to not get involved with this. And certainly nobody wants a war with Iran or war in Yemen. But, the previous administration had acted in a way that the Houthis were somewhat deterred. That deterrence seems to be long gone.
Jonathan, you mentioned nobody wanting wars in other states, but an Israeli airstrike killed a senior leader of Iran's Revolutionary Guards in Syria on Monday. Fire was also exchanged with Hezbollah on the Israel-Lebanese border yesterday. Meanwhile, we also heard in India there was an explosion near the Israeli embassy in New Delhi. Authorities said no staff were hurt and an investigation is still ongoing in that case. I wanted to ask, though, what is the level of concern that these are just small steps toward a wider conflict?
Well, we hope it's not a step towards a wider conflict. I think after October 7th, I think most observers were not so much afraid. They were rather sure that Hezbollah would enter this war on Iran's orders to help Hamas and serve as a second front against Israel. They chose not to. Rather wisely, I might add, for the people of Lebanon, who would have suffered greatly if Israel had been forced to fight, to wage another, a second front against Hezbollah. But what Hezbollah has done is, it continues to fire at Israel periodically. Many Israelis have been forced to leave their homes in northern Israel and can't go home until this is over. Just as I might add, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been forced out of their homes in southern Israel by the war against Hamas. And they can't, and the events of October 7th, they can't go home until Hamas is cleared out of Gaza. So, this is an ongoing threat. Now, as far as what's happened in Syria, Israel has been engaged in a small level war with Iran in Syria for years. Israel has attacked Iranian targets in Syria many times, frankly, with the permission of the Russians, who have their own military forces in Syria and who up until October 7th seemed to be quite happy with it. They didn't want Iran getting too much power. This is sort of a low-level conflict, and it is to be hoped that it stays low-level, but it does have the potential for spreading, which is worrisome to Israel, but it's, one war at a time is Israel's, they're not starting a second front until they have dealt with Hamas. And then hopefully Hezbollah will stop firing once it's clear that, Israel has no distractions but to deal with them.
Turkish president recently compared Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Adolf Hitler, likening Israel's assault on Gaza to Nazi Germany's killing of Jews. What you're seeing on screen right now is Netanyahu's response on Twitter saying, Erdogan, who is committing genocide against the Kurds and who holds the world record for imprisoning journalists who oppose his regime, is the last person who can preach morality to us. The IDF, which is the most moral army in the world, is fighting to eliminate the most abhorrent and brutal terrorist organization in the world. It continues Hamas ISIS, which has committed crimes against humanity and which Erdogan has praised and whose leaders he hosts. Jonathan, how significant is perhaps some of this back and forth between Bibi Netanyahu and Erdogan here?
Well, what Netanyahu said about Erdogan is, of course, right. Everybody knows that he's a tyrant. He's an Islamist. He's a tyrant as far as the Kurds are concerned, and he has a terrible human rights record, and he's a longtime supporter, at least vocally, of Hamas. But the curious thing about this, the question you asked me is not, what Erdogan said. Is that outrageous? Of course, it's outrageous. Does it signify that Turkey is going to do something about that? Absolutely not. Turkey has been talking out of both sides of its mouth for years on Israel. It has been Erdogan has been among the most vicious attackers of Israel and saying all sorts of anti-Semitic, awful things. But at the same time, wanting never to completely cut off relations with Israel. Indeed, before October 7th, there was a clear warming of relations between Israel and Turkey because it's in Turkey's interest. Turkey is a NATO member. Turkey worries about other, loose cannons in the region, including Iran, with whom it has sort of frenemy status. Turkey is, Erdogan is grandstanding to his own Islamist voter base. He's grandstanding to the Islamic world in general because he likes to pretend that he's the second coming of the Ottoman Sultan. But Erdogan is, he's a paper tiger. He isn't going to do anything about this. He's just going to say outrageous things. And, he's despicable, for sure. But bet once the fighting stops in Gaza, Turkey will be, cozying up to Israel again, looking for better economic relations. It's curious, but we shouldn't be distracted by these terrible things that he's saying.
It was announced by Axios reporting this, that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is going to be making yet another round through the Middle East. He's going to be visiting Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. What are you going to be watching for late next week as Blinken makes his fifth trip through the Middle East since October 7th?
Well, the question is it just going to be more of the same, or is he going to do something different? He's been shuttling back and forth to the region, and that's appropriate that he should do so. He is the Secretary of State. But I think people sort of very much are watching every word he says, and every other American envoy who comes over there, whether it was Secretary of Defense Austin or somebody, or National Security Advisor Sullivan, they're all looking for the moment when Biden and his administration will lower the hammer on Israel and try to stop the war. It's clear they don't entirely want to do it, or they feel that it would be foolish to try because Israel will say no if the United States demands that they allow Hamas to emerge triumphant and alive from this war. So I think he's just putting out fires, trying to keep everybody talking to each other among the Arab state allies who are in public viciously against Israel, in private. We're very happy to see Hamas eliminated. And I think it's just sort of more putting out fires, more, as we say, jawboning the foreign policy problems. The thing to look for is if he tries to do something more than that. And frankly, right now, I think we have right to be skeptical about that because he's had many opportunities to do so and he hasn't.
Jonathan Tobin is the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, otherwise known as JNS. We appreciate your time.
Thanks very much.